So a lot of sort of the coaching that I do, so people think, oh, as a nutrition coach, you tell people what to eat, 30 grams of chicken breast and this and that. You give me recipes. That is not what I do. I've become pretty good at helping people realize that they can grow despite the circumstances and the challenges that they're faced with. And the way that we do that is that you look at your current situation and you look at three things. You look at what is completely out of your control, you look at what is kind of in your control, and you look at something that you are 100% in control of. And then you break them down into things that you can change and the things that you cannot change.
Hi guys, and welcome back to the Journey podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have my guest, Sherry Edwards, who is a nutrition coach. She is also, I would say, an entrepreneur at heart, because I was looking through some of the stuff and she has got so many amazing things that she does. She's also, in fact, it's best, Sherry, why don't you tell us about what you do and a little bit more about the nutrition coach and Munchies and Macros.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Russell, for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here. As you said, my name is Sherry Edwards. I am a nutrition coach. I started Munchies and Macros, which is a nutrition coaching business, in the middle of a pandemic. And
oh, wow.
I sort of I've gone through so many different career types, and I've always been a bit of a sort of like wanting to start a business. And, you know, I did fashion retailing with my husband years ago on the high street. And then when that closed down, I moved on to a food business making bao buns. And then that closed down because of the pandemic. And I thought, well, I didn't want to go and deliver food and, you know, have to do all of that when I've got two small children that I had to homeschool. So there's a lot of pressure and there's loads going on. So I thought, okay, what can I do that I actually love and I'm really passionate about? And turns out that I love food and I love fitness. I mean, I've been into fitness most of my life, and I've been into food because, you know, I'm from Bangkok, Thailand, and Bangkok, as you know, is sort of like food capital of the world. And just I sort of fell into it, and I put the two together, and I started nutrition coaching so that it can help people learn to love their bodies again and you know, be active. And so yeah, nutrition coaching just sort of grew from there.
Cool. I also looked up, you've also a co-owner of the hat place. Is that still something that's going on?
Yeah, so that was the fashion retail business with my husband. So yes, you have done your research. So yes, that was on the high street in Chester. So we don't live very far from Chester. We live in a very small town called Pinnamonith. I'm surrounded by boxes. You can't see in the background, but I'm surrounded by boxes. We are moving house soon. So we're going to move a little bit deeper into North Wales. But so yes, we had the hat place on High Street in Chester, and then we closed that down, and then I sort of moved on to the Bowel Revolution, which was a food business, and then now Munchies and Macros.
And sorry, two other things I noticed is you're a yoga instructor.
I am also a yoga instructor.
Everton Football Club, the blue side.
You must have been okay. So I realized I don't talk about that actually, but so you must have been on LinkedIn, because I do have all of my information, sort of like the CV on. So I did teach.
That's super cool.
It was a really cool gig, actually. I did teach the Everton footballers, and it's quite embarrassing because when I was called in for the job, Matt, who's a head physio there, he's like, you know, are you interested in teaching yoga for Everton? And I was like, he literally talked for about 10 minutes and he's like, it's going to be a good gig. And I just went, I'm really sorry. What is Everton? I am not a football fan. God. I know. I came home.
If there's any of you Liverpool fans, I'm sorry. So, I mean, Liverpoolians.
Oh, yeah. My husband was mortified when I told him. I was like, I must have just completely embarrassed myself, but they didn't care. They just wanted a yoga teacher. And so I taught there for a good year. And then, left.
That's amazing. Can I quickly just touch on that? Because I play a lot of football, and I know that I feel really stiff from my hips, and I've always tried to do yoga, like try it, you know, watch a YouTube video. And actually it is the most painful and most difficult thing I've ever found, like more so than training or going to the gym. So like, do you have any quick advice for us footballers at amateur, semi-pro level that like what are the benefits? Because obviously you train the pros.
Yes, I would definitely say the thing that people don't often think about is, as you know, people don't think about stretching and sort of preparing the body for like fast paced and quick movements, you know, or like high impact. And they only realize that once they hit their 30s or their 40s. And I often get people coming up to me and going, I wish I practiced yoga or knew about it or knew the importance of it at a younger age. So you often do get that. But the only advice I can give really is to find time to stretch, even if it's like 5 to 10 minutes every single day. It's so, so important. And we are all guilty. Like even myself as a yoga teacher, I'm also a weightlifter, a CrossFitter. I love Olympic lifting. And as a person who tends to be very fast paced, I do get impatient and I do forget to do yoga. So it's very, very easy to forget. But I think if we create habits where we practice it all the time, even if it's like first thing in the morning or 5 minutes before you go to bed, and turn that into a habit, definitely it makes a huge difference.
Okay, cool. So basically, the Journey podcast is kind of like, I'm trying to put together a catalog of amazing people who kind of tell us about their journey. For example, you know, you're obviously a nutrition coach now. I'm really interested to hear about that because I've realized that I want to give back, and I'm hopefully doing that through this podcast, and eventually would love to coach people, whether that's through construction or through, you know, stuff in life. I haven't quite figured that out. So, you know, definitely want to try and unpack that a little bit later on in the podcast. But what I'm hoping is to give, you know, young people, older people, you know, the whole spectrum, just inspiration into, for example, you know, people probably think there's a specific way into getting to become a nutrition coach. You go to university, you focus on science and all that sort of stuff, and then maybe have a long career. And I'm not quite sure. You probably give me a bit more insight. And then, you know, then you start your successful business. And then, as we've heard with you, it completely didn't happen that way. And it, you know, and so that's kind of what I'm hoping to unpack and give inspiration to people who might want even to be a nutrition coach. So where would you like to start on your journey? Would you like to kind of go from where we are now and work backwards, or kind of like take us right to the beginning where it will start, like where you come from, where you're born, and go from there?
Well, I'll give you an insight as to what it was like growing up. So I was born in the States, in California, but I moved to Thailand when I was 3. So I consider myself fully Thai. I grew up in Thailand and I went to an international school. Now it's funny you say sort of that you want to give back to kids, because I wish that I had had the support system that I felt was missing when I was younger. I was not like, people think because I'm very, very sporty, I'm a very sporty person. Like I train, you know, like 2 hours, you know, 4 or 5 times a week. And people think that I am naturally athletic. Like nothing could be further from the truth. I had thick glasses. I had braces in school. I was like the uncool kid. And you'd think because I was uncool, I'd be good at the academic side. I wasn't particularly great at that either. I had ADHD. I mean, I have ADHD. So I had learning difficulties, although that wasn't recognized. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 21 as like a fully grown adult. So there's the ADHD in the background, not really being great academically and not being great in school. And you know what it's like in school. And, you know, going to school in the 80s and the 90s, kids are cruel in high school, even now in 2021.
Yeah, they're still
Imagine what it's like growing up in the 80s and the 90s when you're not great at like maths and you're not great at sports either. Like high school can be a very cruel place. So I never kind of like found my thing in school. I just sort of, you know, like there were some things that I did really enjoy, but I never really flourished at anything. Like I loved arts. I've always been a really creative person. And I've always sort of like loved sort of literature, but I was never great at anything. I never stood out in school as anything. And I think if your listeners are the sort of at that age, I think it's really important to understand that just because you haven't felt like you strongly fall into something or you're amazing at anything, it doesn't mean that you're not going to one day find something that you are absolutely passionate about and be amazing at. You know, I'm not saying I am amazing at what I do, but I definitely feel like if somebody had told me that when I was younger, I would at least have the confidence to grow as a person, because there's always been this fear. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this fear of failure, is so, the pull sometimes can be so strong. You've got the imposter syndrome, and then think now that there's all this social media that kids are being exposed to all the time. You've got to look perfect. You've got to, like have a perfect career, and all of that pressure just mounts onto people. So it's really, really important to recognize that what you see is the sort of like top 1% of the world that is kind of being put out there for the rest of us, and it's just not reality.
Yeah, so true. So
yeah.
like international school, like what was that like? Because is that like a blend of different kids from loads of different places, and they're all kind of getting put together? Because you're the first podcast guest that I've had that went to international school. So just like to quickly unpack that. Like what was that like? So was it multicultural in a way, or was it loads of mainly Thai, or like?
I don't think we had any Thai friends, actually. We didn't really have a lot of Thai friends. Like, they were from all over the world. So our friends were from the UK, from Europe, from India, from China. They were literally from all over the world.
Okay.
So it's really, yeah, I'm so glad that I grew up in that kind of culture, because as soon as you leave the school and you go back to your home in Bangkok or whatever, like everyone else is Thai, but when you go into school, you're sort of dropped into this like multicultural place where like all of your friends speak at least 2 languages. Everyone speaks like English and Thai because they live in Thailand. They probably speak another language from wherever they're from. So that was really interesting. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And you said something about like you really love literature and art. It's something that I've kind of noticed on the podcast. There's a link between people saying, "Oh, I didn't really like school. I did like this." Was it because of a teacher that you really liked it, or what was sort of the thing that captured your attention about art and literature? Was it? Can you remember? Was it like a specific teacher or a lesson, or like I'm just trying to find a link between like all my different guests as to why they specifically felt.
I think for me in particular, it was that I had a learning difficulty. I realized I think it's like a learning disability, but it's not, because ADHD is not a disability. It's just a learning difficulty. And I think because I had that, I could never latch on to something. And I was always really afraid of authority. So all of the teachers in school frightened me. I was always really scared of them. So I never really had a great relationship with any of the teachers, but I think I loved literature and I loved art because it was the one thing where I could create a world in my own head. And like, I'm making myself sound like I was really great at art. I was not. Okay. I was the only thing that I really did enjoy. But I think I could just create this like sort of imaginary world in my head, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Does make sense. Okay, cool. So then you leave international school. How do you then, like, what age did you leave international school?
So graduated at 18 and then went to a Thai university and then studied Bachelor of Arts. So it was even more literature, and then sort of just fell in love with more reading and more writing. And that sort of became like something I really loved. And I pretty much started teaching yoga when I was I think when I just graduated from university. So I've taught yoga for like 19 years, and sort of health and fitness, and that sort of just started to come together for me. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so how did you get yoga? How did you even turn into a yoga teacher? Like, just started doing it, really good at it, kind of?
Yeah, just started practicing yoga, started the classes and realized how much I loved it, and just decided that I wanted to get myself qualified because it was something that seemed really fun at the time. So yeah, got myself trained at 21 and then just started teaching at various studios and absolutely loved it. I mean, I guess you could argue that that's the only job that I've kept for more than like 2 years. I've been teaching for 19 years. I mean, I definitely don't teach full-time now. My full-time job is as a nutrition coach and as a mother. I don't teach that much yoga now, but it is the one thing that I've sort of kept, around.
Okay, amazing. So like what happens then? So you're just like doing yoga for 19 years. When did you kind of like move over to the UK? Did you stay in Bangkok that whole time just teaching yoga? Like what's going on in Sherry's life like as you're
So
progressing through?
yeah, so from 21 onwards, I just kept teaching yoga. My full-time job in Thailand was I worked on television, and that's actually how I met my husband, funny enough. So I worked on television as a TV host, and I did some acting, but the majority of the work was television hosting, and taught yoga as a part-time job, and then met my husband on a movie set because our movie production company had hired sort of like an underwater team, and he was a diving instructor, and that's sort of how we met. So fell in love, and then moved over here, had a baby over here, and that's sort of how life in the UK started. And because I moved over here as a heavily pregnant woman, I didn't have any friends. I couldn't drive a car because I literally just had a baby. Then yoga was the only thing that I knew that I could teach. And that was that was 11 years ago. Yoga was still kind of new in like the North. So there weren't a lot of teachers in the sort of Manchester area at the time. And I just sort of fell into that, and it just kind of started from there.
Sorry, so you moved over with your husband because he got a job or you got a job or
Yeah, so
like,
he got a job. My husband is a solicitor, and I mean he's not a practicing solicitor
okay.
anymore, but that's sort of what his thing is. And moved over here, and he started, doing his thing. And I just wanted something to do other than being a mother. And so I started teaching yoga once a week, and it sort of just grew from there.
Okay, cool. Well, look, I mean, you're flying through your life like quite quite quickly. So can you tell us a little bit more about, the Bowel Revolution? Obviously, you were the hat place, and then obviously COVID hit all of us. And what was the transition? You spoke a little bit about how you didn't really want to transition what the next step would have been, which was delivering food out and about, and then you decided, well, actually, do you know what, did you just had your children, or was this, had you had your children before you started the Bowel Revolution?
So Bowel Revolution is relatively new. Bowel Revolution didn't even last for a year, I don't think. I think I started the Bowel Revolution in the summer of 2019. And was it a year old? So yeah,
So why did you
summer
start it? Yeah, like what was the story behind that?
So the story behind the Bowel Revolution was that we had closed the hat shop. And because I'm always looking for something to do, I had already started writing a business plan as we were closing the hat place, because I knew that obviously we were going to need money, and I needed something to do. I always need to have a focus, because if I don't, then I don't like not having a focus. So I said, okay, I'm going to do something. And my husband said, well, why don't you do something to do with food? Because you've always loved food. I love cooking. I love creating recipes. So I came up with this concept about Revolution, and it absolutely took off. Like I was just absolutely surprised by it. But as a person who wasn't naturally great at running business, I was great in the kitchen, and I was great at creating these stuff and making them look good in the food photography, and that looked great. But I couldn't scale up from there. So I just did food events. I would go to the North Wales food event, and then we would sell out. It would be really good. And then I just go to the next event, and then just sort of hopped on from there to there. And then I did a few in Chester, and that did fantastically well as well. But then we had one final event, and that was when everyone was going, ooh, is the event going to happen? Because are we going to go into lockdown? We had the event on, I think it was like the 19th or something of March, and then we closed, like the UK went into lockdown like the weekend after that. So I feel like we got pretty lucky. I sort of took what I needed to take from the business. And in the lockdown, people were sort of asking if I would deliver. And at first I thought about it, but then it meant that I would have to cook, and then get my husband to drive and deliver the food, and then somehow have to figure out how we're gonna homeschool two kids as well in a pandemic. And I just thought, you know what? I don't think that I can do this. It was just not, it wasn't a scalable business because I didn't have enough staff, and I just wanted my mental health to be intact as I was homeschooling the kids. And I wanted them to get as much out of the homeschool, because people talk about how stressful it is for adults. People forget how emotional children get as well. They don't get to see their friends. They go from seeing their friends and running around in the outdoor every single day to being cooped up in a house, and they're confused. And there's all these emotions going on. And I said to my husband, we sat down and I said, we can't do this. We just literally have to just suck it up, just give the kids the best of our attention as we possibly can. And that's how the idea of, like I sort of just fell into this nutrition coaching. And it was really by chance, because we had, before I'd started the nutrition coaching, I thought that I was going to get myself certified so that I could know what kind of things to put in a cookie. Because I thought, well, maybe I'll do a cookie business. That might be easier. I can, cookies are easier to make than bao buns. And as I was doing the nutrition coaching portion, the certification, I realized that this is sort of my calling. I think that I could be really, really good at this, because I love teaching people, and I love, putting food together and fitness. And that's literally how it grew from there.
Okay. I have a couple of questions. Obviously that takes quite a lot of courage to kind of like just make a decision. You started a business, obviously it had like instant success. And then obviously you made the decision, made it very clear for you because of your children. But like, what sort of advice do you have for people? Because, I've really struggled in the last sort of year. Like I had a similar story, lockdown. I really took my business seriously, and I had head down focused, and it grew so much, from 2 builders to 30 builders now. And it's so intense and so much pressure. And like, what advice do you have for people sometimes, because it might not be working out. Like in my case, I do feel like it is working out, but like it takes a lot of courage, and obviously your children helped you get clarity on the decision. But I mean, what would you say to, say, a young person or someone who's had a successful business, maybe gone through a process that doesn't make it viable for their life anymore, and have the courage to basically be like, you know what, this isn't working for me, or it's not going to work for our family. And even though I've had this great success and I can see it, moving forward, like how, for you, I get that you had the clarity with your children, but like, what advice would you give? Because, it's quite a difficult thing to quit. Not a lot of people, they see that as failure. They would see that and like beat themselves up, and they might not then have the confidence to start over again like you have. So, I mean, for me, I get how clear it was for you, because your children, and that's obviously the most important thing, your family, your husband and stuff. So, but do you have any advice from kind of going through that experience, and like from the experience that you had? Because you seem like you're just seamlessly like, yeah, I just moved to England, I started this thing, I was doing a hat. You're making everything seem so really like easy and simple, but as everyone knows, it's not that simple. Do you have any sort of advice or sort of words of wisdom, or any things that you took away from that whole experience that we could maybe pass on to our listeners?
The one thing that I have learned in all of this is that every time you think that you are failing, and this might just be personal, but to me, it's like every time I thought I was failing and I came out the other end, I'd realize that I wasn't failing. I was actually growing as a person, as a business person, as a mother, as an athlete. Every single time I fail, I'm realizing that it's not actually failure. It's just feedback. It's telling you what isn't working. And I think that mindset shift is incredibly powerful when you realize anytime you see something as you're falling backwards, or you're failing, or something as plateauing, you have to extract information from it, whether it's tangible and factual information or your emotions. You've got to take something out of that and look at it as from the most logical standpoint as possible, and say, what can I learn from the situation that I am in, and what can I do about it? So a lot of sort of the coaching that I do, so people think, oh, as a nutrition coach, you tell people what to eat, 30 grams of chicken breast and this and that, you give me recipes. That is not what I do. I've become pretty good at helping people realize that they can grow despite the circumstances and the challenges that they're faced with. And the way that we do that is that you look at your current situation and you look at three things. You look at what is completely out of your control. You look at what is kind of in your control, and you look at something that you are 100% in control of. And then you break them down into things that you can change and the things that you cannot change. So for example, the pandemic, we cannot change the pandemic. There is nothing we can do. If COVID-19 wants to come in, it wants to come in. There is nothing we can do. Maybe some things that you could potentially change. And I know that there are a lot of people that sign petitions. So if you think that there is something that you can put your name on, or something that you can kind of change. So for example, signing a petition, or, like finding out that maybe that there is some sort of community support for local businesses, that kind of stuff. If there is something that you can be a little bit in control of, then you can control it. Now, I always talk about thinking and feeling as something that you cannot control. You can't control the way you think, and you cannot control the way you feel. For example, if I say to someone, don't think of a pink elephant, you're going to think of a pink elephant, but you can control your actions that come out of those feelings. And then when you break all of those things down and you're looking at your situation, so we go back to failure, and you're like, I've just tried to start this business. I put every single thing, I put all my eggs in one basket, and I feel like I'm failing. That feeling can be very, very real to you. And I 100% understand this, because I have failed so many different businesses before I got to this point, and I'm still learning how to run a business, right? I'm still learning how to be an entrepreneur. But then you sit back and you take all that information back and you say, what's out of my control? What do I have some control over, and what do I have full control over? And then you pull that information back, and then you sit from that point, and then you have to think, you're going to have to make the decision that makes the most sense for your life in this sort of position that you are in now.
Okay. Wow. That's amazing advice. Thank you for sharing that. So, what, from a nutrition perspective, like, how does someone apply that to their life? Like, I was looking at your website, munchiesandmacros.com, and you offer two sort of services that you do, the 12-week program and then the 1 hour sort of session. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you created those programs, and like how you essentially applied that sort of thinking and mindset to give clarity ultimately to the people who you're helping? Because I was looking like at all of the testimonials, and it's amazing to see that I kind of get what you're saying and can feel sort of the passion, but very clear. A lot of coaches, I've had a lot of coaching sessions with various different people, and in me trying to get to where I have, and you seem very, you kind of like wipe away all the bullshit and kind of just say it as it is. So like, how did you get to that point where you're just like creating clarity for your different programs?
I 100% believe in coaching. I have two coaches. I have a business coach, and I have a mentor who's also sort of like a coach, but like on the nutrition side of things. And this is why I'm so passionate about coaching, because I feel like I would be lost without them. And, to answer your question, like, how did I come up with these two different plans? It was through my business coach not telling me what to do or how to do, more she's asking the right questions so that I am answering them, and I'm finding the answers out myself. So there are the two coaching plans are, I coach athletes. I coach masters athletes. So whether or not that's sort of your listeners' demographics, I don't know, but masters athletes, so basically anyone from 35 up. Predominantly, I like to work with the over 40s. And the reason why I focus on the over 40s is because I am an over 40 athlete. And I know the struggles of, like a parent that you're at a certain age, and then, your body's sort of falling apart because you've got kids, and you've got a million things going on, and life is very stressful. So all of that added on to knowing how to eat the right foods, and either overtraining or, that kind of stuff, it can kind of get on top of you. So the sort of 12-week plan is to help somebody create better habits and good behavior around food, because you often get people going, I eat perfectly Mondays through to Fridays, but I'm not losing the weight or I'm not getting the results. Well, then you have to look at what you're eating from the Friday night through to the Saturday, through to the Sunday. So, and when you see that, it's like their diet is sort of very inconsistent and a little bit all over the place. Whereas people who hop onto the 1 hour intensive call, those people tend to be athletes that have a pretty good relationship with food, that just want to know, okay, how do I eat for optimal performance? That's more, hence why it's called Performance Catalyst, because it's there to teach you how to eat to optimize your performance. People don't realize how important meal timings can be for performance. So if you've just done 1 to 3 hours of training, it is about what you're eating within the 24-hour period, but you need to focus on the peri-carb. So that's sort of like the pre-workout, the intra workout, and the post-workout. And the post-workout arguably is probably the most important, because that is essentially your recovery meal. If you don't eat well enough to recover, you're not going to be able to train as hard the next day. So instead of putting your body through the stress that it needs to increase PBs and get better and faster and lift heavier, instead of like putting the right amount of stress on your body, is putting too much stress and you're not recovering. When you're not recovering, you're not performing your best. So basically that's sort of like the two different plans. One is more just to kind of teach someone how to specifically eat. And the other one, the 12-week plan, the longer one, is more about habits and, obviously helping people to change their body composition as well, but more geared towards people who need a little bit more coaching on how to cope with their emotions around food, how to improve the relationship with their body, and so on.
Okay, really cool. And I saw your husband was your first client.
He was,
I saw
yeah.
it, and he's like ripped. Is he still ripped now, or did he like
He
quit
is.
after that?
Yeah, he is. He's a phenomenon, really, because
Yeah, I saw. I was like, he looks like he's
can't.
come out of the army. I was like,
I
what the
know.
hell?
And he's 43. I can't sustain that
Yeah,
body, but
you both don't look that age at all, but I must say.
I mean, there's a lot going on. There's genetics. There's the fact that we both don't have a stressful 9 to 5 job. We don't have to get in our cars and drive somewhere. We literally work at our desk, and our gym is our home gym, so we can literally walk 10 steps over. And we have created sort of a little pocket that makes things easy for us. I feel very grateful, but I feel like I have to make that clear as well. Like, we are able to sustain these results because it's sort of easy for us, because we don't have to travel far to the gym. Some people are like, how do you find the motivation to go to the gym or to exercise? I'm like, because I don't have to sit in the car for 20 minutes to drive to the gym. And when I'm tired, I walk over to my gym and I do a few squats, and by then you're in it, so you have to do it. So it's not about motivation for us, but I do understand the struggles for people who do have a 9 to 5 job and have to really motivate themselves to get out of the house to go to the gym. It can be great.
And you guys train together?
We do. We train together. Yeah.
So the mantra, couples train together, stay together, is very true.
It is very strong. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I have one other question I kind of wanted to unpack from what you were saying. So like training at the moment, you said it's all about habits. So I'll use myself as an example. So like once I get into a rhythm, I was reading one of your posts, actually, it's about creating a habit and then sort of building that habit for a long period of time. And then once that habit is no longer, you don't need to, it's on automatic. That's when you really then can start to go to the next habit. And I'm 100% guilty of like, I'm all or nothing. So like, go through a period and then you realize, shit, my life is shit. I'm really stressed. I haven't got it in balance. I'm not really connected with my fiance. I haven't seen my mom. Like, it's just all over the place. Like, work is just stress, and all I'm doing is work. I'm not being present. And then all of a sudden you'd be like, bam, okay, I'm going to change my life. So then you go sit down like one Sunday, you write down all your goals. Some people do this every New Year's, and then you like as your post says, I'll write 10 things down. Right, I'm going to train 3 times a week. I'm going to go running. I'm going to go see my mom every weekend. I'm going to spend time with my niece. And then you end up with this unrealistic list that is unsustainable. And like at the moment, I'm doing a high performance coaching with one of the guys who was on my podcast, Lee Evans. And he was saying how there's high achievers and then there's high performance. High performance is all about sustaining and looking after your energy infrastructure, getting clarity on what you're about, and essentially there's 5 pillars that you, like, anyone listening can go and listen back, but it's about managing all these things so you can have a very balanced life. High achievers are always about, I'm going to get all of this done, and like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and not managing their sleep or hydration and all these important things that really kind of make you sustain your life and have it gradually improve. And I'm assuming that nutrition and also like training and what you talk about in terms of habits is so important. So what sort of advice can you give? Is it like one habit at a time, and how long should you do that habit before you introduce the next one? So like at the moment I'm training, getting up at 6 a.m, and I'm like trying to train for an hour and a half, rain, sleet, snow, whatever. And I'm doing that on a Monday and a Friday, because before I tried to do it, I was doing it 4 days a week. And I noticed, I went out drinking once with my friends after lockdown ended, and it's like, I didn't go back again. And I find the other thing I'm trying to figure out, and I don't know if you might know the answer to this, is like, why is it after one bender or one big night out that all your habits go in the bin, and then you feel like you're starting from scratch again? Is it nutrition? Is it something that alcohol does to your brain? Does it, like, I don't know if you know the answer, but I'm sure there's loads of young people listening to this, or in the future listening to this, that would love to get your insight on that.
I would love to be able to answer that. I don't know if I can, because I'm a teetotaler. I don't drink alcohol at all.
Oh, okay.
So I
have you always been like that?
I have. So I don't, not because I've always been healthy, just because I just don't drink alcohol. I just don't, it's not like my vices are sort of like chocolate and crisps. So it's not like,
okay,
there's literally like no shade on anybody that my husband drinks, all of my friends drink. I just don't drink. So I don't understand the feeling that you guys get when you wake up in the morning and you feel groggy, but I do coach people who do go, on like a Friday night and they feel awful. They wake up out of it. And I think a lot of it is to do with mindset. So whether we're talking about alcohol, or we're talking about Chinese takeout, or we're talking about fish and chips, whatever it is, this is human nature. We tend to, and this is the first thing I break down when somebody comes onto the plan. There is no such thing as good food and bad food. Mm-hmm. If food has been manufactured to go into the human body, it is literally factually energy. There's no bad energy, good energy. It is literally factually, it's just food, right?
Okay.
But what happens is that we as humans, and their social media, is just as guilty as that. We tend to say, oh, chocolates and crisps, they're bad for you. Kale is good for you. Spinach is good for you. And what that does is that it labels foods, and it makes us feel guilty when we eat things that are not good, or we eat things that are bad. So we'll say, I eat great from Mondays through to Fridays, and then I go out drinking. And because we've told ourselves drinking is bad, eating fast food is bad, you eat it, you feel guilty, and you're like, oh, well, I've eaten it now. I've fallen off the wagon. It's all or nothing. I'm just going to keep eating. And then you feel bad. And then you come out the other end the next day feeling terrible because you put all this, processed food in your body, you put all this alcohol in. And yes, it might not be great for your body, but if you just eaten the one meal, or maybe just had one beer, you'd probably wake up the next day feeling absolutely fine. But because we binge, because we've restricted food the entire week, or some people go 4 weeks on a diet or whatever it is restricting their favorite foods. Once they eat it, they don't just eat one, they just eat and eat and eat until they feel awful. So that's basically sort of the binge cycle that I see. And so my job as a nutrition coach is to break that cycle. And we do that by, as soon as somebody comes onto the plan, I say, don't restrict any food. I had a gentleman who came on the plan and he said, I drink probably a can of beers, sometimes 3 every night, and I would like to stop doing that. And I said, okay, if you want to stop doing that, then you can drop. So let's just for argument's sake, say you had 1 can of beer every single night for 7 nights. I know that the gentleman drinks more than that, but let's just say you average it out, 1 can of beer, 7 nights. Can we drop that down to 6 cans of beer per week? Can we drop, then when you get used to that feeling, can we drop it down to 5? Then can we drop it down to 4? I would never say completely give it up, because if you gave up something that you absolutely love and you got to the end of the 12-week plan, what do you think is going to be the first thing that you reach for when you're done? And what would have been the purpose? There, you would not have learned anything. So you want to create better habits and you want to be consistent with that. And to answer your question, to go back to what you're asking, like, is it better to just create one habit or is it better to create a million things? I think most of us already know the answer. You can spread yourself out too thin, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with having goals, you know, whether it's your birthday goals or New Year's goals. If you have 10, write down 10, but pick one. So for example, if you have 10 goals and you say, I want to lose 10 pounds or 10 kilos by a certain amount of time. And then the other one, as you say, I want to spend more time with my mom. Or some people say, I want to write letters and, you know, all of these things. List your goals out and then pick one that you want to work on, and then split that one goal into 5 subsections. So for example, somebody comes up to me and says, I want to lose 10 kilos. And so that goal is then divided into, okay, if you want to lose 10 kilos by X amount of time, what are the things that you can do monthly to achieve that? What are the things that you can then do weekly to achieve that? And then break it down even more. What are the things that you can do daily to achieve that? So we'll break that down and we'll say, can we add 2 fistfuls of vegetables to your diet every single day? And you repeat that every day until it feels natural. And then you add one more thing. Can you drink 2 more glasses of water? Can you consume lean proteins every day? And so you're creating these tiny little habits that at first you're like, oh yeah, that's easy, I can do that. But when it's easy and you achieve those things, success breeds success, and you feel motivated to do even more. And you're like, oh, okay, this is easy. As opposed to, okay, I want you to go to the gym 5 times a week. I want you to do 1 hour of cardio a week. It seems impossible, because in our heads, when we first do it, we're like, oh yeah, you're pumped and you want to do it. But then when you create these goals that are
unrealistic,
realistic, and you don't achieve them, you get to the end and you just feel deflated. What's the point? So make the goals almost laughable and so small and so silly that when you do it, you're like, oh yeah, well, I told myself I was going to drink, 3 glasses of water every day, and I've done that. Well, what's next? Eat your vegetables, eat your protein, then start exercising or whatever it is that you want to do, and make the goals super small and super achievable, and prove to yourself that you can do that without fail every single day.
Cool. Thanks for that. That's yeah, I'm going to start applying that tomorrow.
For sure.
So one thing you said, that you can eat anything, like, so is that obviously in line with making sure that you're doing training and obviously not binging? So are you saying, because a lot of people say cheat meals, a lot of the nutrition plans that you see and like other coaches and a lot of the stuff that's in the mainstream media, it's like train, hit training, and then you're allowed 1 cheat meal a day. So are you basically saying that there is no such thing as a cheat meal in the nutrition diet? It's sort of, when you're coaching, it's literally, you can eat what you want, just obviously just be a bit more balanced. And is there a link to how much exercise you do to sort of how much of the stuff? How do you measure? As you said, it's to you see it as energy, and that makes so much sense now, the way you've put that out. And I'm obsessed with the word energy at the moment, and like trying to really understand people's energy, food. And as soon as you said that, it clicked. And so if someone is looking like a McDonald's meal, is there there's a certain amount of energy. So do you measure that in terms of the calories that's written? Because I saw one of your posts was like the mac and cheese, and you were like, yeah, this is not apparently for a woman, but you eat a whole pack, you're eating a family
Correct.
size. So like, can you kind of unpack that a little bit for us? And
okay, so that's a really excellent question. I'm so excited to explain this. So first of all, my clients are already athletes, right? So this is not general advice. I can give general advice just in a second, but I want to make clear that when I coach athletes, I would not give the same advice to an athlete as I would give advice. And I always use my mom as an example because she's 70 and she doesn't exercise. So for me to say to someone who exercises, my clients will train anywhere between 5 for the lower ones to 14 hours. Some of them train like 17 hours a week because they're really high performers. So I will tell these guys, as soon as you're done training, to eat a handful of gummy bears because they need that immediately to hit their bodies because their glycogen levels are so low. I would tell my mother to eat brown rice and broccoli and chicken, right? And obviously, if she wanted to eat sweets, I could say, eat the sweets, but minimize it, right? So there is a sense of balance. Now, to answer your question about cheat meals, I personally don't believe in cheat meals. I tell my husband off for using the word cheat meals. I'm like, if you have to cheat on your diet, why are you on the diet in the first place? And it's not about being on a diet. It's about being on a sort of, what's the word? Like mindfulness and awareness of what you are eating. So what we do know now is if there's a book called Burn by Herman Poncer, excellent book about how our metabolisms work. He's a evolutionist. I don't know exactly what he's, the evolutionary archaeologist, something like. He studies the human energy and metabolism in primates and in humans. And what we know now, according to his studies, is that, and some other studies, is that it's not about just eating a donut and then burning off the donut. That's like super simplified. And it has to be simple to the lay person because nobody wants to read books about numbers and science is just too clunky. So we've just simplified it. We've just said, okay, in order to burn off a Mars bar, for example, you have to run 3 laps of X and X. Really, in reality, our metabolisms do not work that way.
Okay.
2 people who weigh exactly the same and are the same height and are the same gender and the same age can eat exactly the same food every day for a week, and one person could lose weight, the other person could not lose any weight at all, or maybe even gain weight. And the reason why that is because our metabolisms are different. Our metabolisms are guided by so many different things. I mean, how much sleep you get, how much stress you're going through, how much lean body mass there is in your body, your hormones, so many different things in our bodies. So to assume that just because you eat a cookie or you eat a donut and you can just go to the gym and burn it off is incorrect. And that in itself, not that it's just incorrect, and it's potentially damaging, because what happens is that people connect the two and they say, if I eat this, I can just go to the gym and burn it off. So you have this unhealthy relationship between food and your body and exercise. So instead of exercising because it feels good to the body and exercising because it is good for you, you're exercising as punishment. I'm a bad person because I ate that cookie and I deserve to go to the gym and I deserve to, do a million burpees until I feel ill. That's not the point of exercise. Exercise is supposed to make you feel great about yourself or perform better or make you proud of yourself for, being able to like hit your last PB or run really fast or perform really good, right? So going back to metabolism, when we talk about energy in versus energy out, there is so much that goes on in your body from the moment a donut goes into your mouth to the time it comes out. So understanding that each person's energy need is completely different is very, very important. So there's no one size fits all. You hear a lot about keto is an excellent diet. Paleo is an excellent diet. It might work for one person, but it might not necessarily work for someone else. Does that sort of make sense? Am I going a little bit?
No. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's like, I'm just taking it all in, and just, it's amazing to hear. It's the first time I've heard anyone talk about, energy and the diet in such a sort of clear way. And like, I understand it fully, and I'm sure the listeners will as well. And I'm actually blown away because it seems very simple. A lot of the science and the books and society and magazines and everything, like my fiance, she reads loads of stuff and she's always like trying to do a diet or exercising or running, and like it's so confusing. And you know, you just made it really very clearly simple. So it's just like, depending on how much you train or how your metabolism is working will determine how much food you need after the training. And there is no such thing as a cheat meal. It's, you take what you need within reason. So don't eat McDonald's four times a day and not train and expect to have an amazing body, because you're not burning any energy, and your metabolism is a major factor in that. And it's influenced by so many different things: stress, sleep, lifestyle, basically. So yeah, that makes perfect sense. And actually the last 10 days, I feel great, because I've like training and I feel like I've got loads more energy. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I realized like I'm under so much stress and pressure at work. And I realized it was really starting to affect everything around me. And training has, like, even though it seems like I should be more tired, it gives me more energy and I don't seem as stressed. I've read loads of books on stress. You know, your relationship to stress will either give you a heart attack when you're older, but if you have a belief like I do, that, you know, it doesn't affect me, you know, because I have a positive relation to it. You know, I know that when I'm stressed, and as long as it's not affecting my life and my family in a negative way or too negative way, then it's not something I need to worry about. But I guess what I was going to say is, do you think then, like, I'm really stressed at the moment, I'm working out, or everyone who I've seen in the last 5 days has been like, Russell, you look really skinny. Are you okay? Like, even my fiance's friends who we haven't seen for like a year, they were like, Russell's really skinny. And I was like, I was looking at myself, I feel really good and I feel like amazing. So it's really interesting. I was wondering, like, it must be because I'm quite stressed at the moment, because I'm positively charged and like working out at the same time. I feel great. And when I look at myself, I feel great. But for everyone else, I might be looking a little bit slimmer than I normally am. So yeah, I guess I've answered my question.
I think the key is knowing your own body, right? So as a coach, I don't tell people how to feel and specifically how to eat, because as you say, everybody is different. But what I do as a coach is I ask them the right questions so that they can go, oh yeah, I feel good and I feel better. So it's looking at, you know, your food choices and how much energy you have, you know, like, and it's not just energy when you're exercising. I will ask them, how is your energy day to day when you go to work? Do you feel good? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, I feel great. Or sometimes it's like, well, I don't feel so good and I'm not sleeping very well. Well, let's break that down and let's explore that a little bit. Why are you having a bad week? Is it because you're stressed out, or is it physically what you were eating or what you were not eating? So it's looking at all of that and talking about how you were saying your fiance is doing all of this studying. It's interesting because people do a lot of research. When people come to you as a nutrition coach, they already know loads of information because Google, right? Like
Yeah.
there's Wikipedia, there's Google, there's all these like articles that you can read, and some of it is true, some of it is not, but there is bucket loads of information out there, and it can be very, very confusing. And, you know, I go back to saying keto is great for one person, but it might be terrible for you. So it's understanding what your body needs. But what we do generally know, is that the more varied your diet is, the better it's going to be. So I'm going to say this as a very wide scale, whether you are an active athletic person or whether you are more of someone that sort of sits at a desk at 95 and you don't exercise, that's fine. Whatever kind of lifestyle you have, the more varied your diet is, the better it's going to be. So for this reason, I tend to recommend that people don't restrict food. And when I say restrict, I mean anything. So don't restrict sugars, don't restrict gluten, don't restrict dairy just because your friends are doing it and somebody says it's the best diet in the world. Restrict only if you know factually that it is something that you are allergic to or something that you cannot consume for whatever reason. But if you can consume a varied diet, because micronutrients and vitamins, those things are found in loads of different foods. So by being able to expose yourselves to different kinds of foods, then you are likely going to have a balanced diet and therefore have better health.
So what's your view then on like people who are vegetarian or vegan, but not for sort of animal rights reasons, or necessarily maybe worried about climate change, or, you know, some of the woke reasons that people choose to go in a specific path. So like at the moment, we've been vegetarian for like 7 months, and it was more just wanting to create a new habit and like challenge ourselves, and we've done it. And initially we were like, oh my god, this is going to be so challenging, and it hasn't been that challenging because there's so much amazing food. Like, and my relationship to vegetarians and vegetables has completely changed. So I'm so glad I've done it, and like I'm definitely going to eat meat again, like you said, and especially after this phone call, I might go and buy a steak. But like, what's your view on those sort of people who specifically maybe choose to be vegetarian or vegan for less woke reasons, and more because they think it's actually a healthier way of living, etc. Because, you know, like I've been doing it now quite 7 months, and like the only thing, we're invited to a wedding soon, and I was just like, I've got to have some steak, because my friend was like, it was either squash or like this amazing banging French steak, and I was just like, come on, like this is not happening to me again. But I mean, do you have, like, without sort of, I know this, sometimes people get worried about offending other people, but like, I mean, like, just say how it is. But what's your view on that? Like, do you feel there's people who are vegetarian or vegan might be lacking in why, if their reason is to be solely healthy, and not other sort of reasons, you know, that I've mentioned?
It's so obviously whatever diet you choose is a personal reason. And I know you were saying you're very adamant to say that we're not talking about for moral reasons, for ethic reasons, right? So you're saying people who choose to have a vegan diet or vegetarian diet because they think it's better for their bodies, right?
Yeah.
So specifically answering that, you can have a healthy body and you can have a healthy diet on any kind of diet. You can do it whether you are a vegetarian or whether you are a vegan or whether you are a meat eater. So it's more about the foods that you choose. So 100%, you can be very healthy on a vegetarian diet and a vegan diet, but you can also equally be as healthy as a person who eats meats. Granted, they eat vegetables as well, not just meats on its own.
Yeah.
So in the opposite scale, you can have vegans and vegetarians that just snack on donuts. And you do have, you know, like KFC range. I didn't even know this, but apparently a KFC does like a vegan range. So that sort of, I thought was ironic. But you know, I mean, I wrote a blog about, we have considered, me and my husband as well, because we saw Seaspiracy. I don't know if you've seen
Oh
it.
my god, we watched that.
My goodness, right?
So we went vegetarian.
Yeah,
oh my god.
100%. I have given up fish. Okay, not
Have
100%.
you?
I've had fish once.
Did you see the salmon thing? The salmon. Oh my god! After watching that Scottish salmon, I almost threw up. We were literally like no.
Yeah, I love fish, and I would eat fish every single day. But I watched that. My husband is a diving instructor, and he's very, very passionate about marine life. And he was just, after he saw that, he was so sad. And he's just like, we cannot eat fish anymore. So we literally gave up fish. So I said to my husband, I'm like, babe, I really want sushi. Can I just have it once? So I have had sushi once since watching it. But to answer you, so I wrote a blog about how to make better choices or how to transition into a plant-based diet. So
where can we find that? Where can we find that blog?
So that's on the Munchies and Macros website. It's I think it's called how to get enough protein as a plant-based dieter or something like that.
Cool.
But yeah, so that'll list the things that you can eat as a plant-based dieter, and it will talk about protein and why protein is important, where you can find protein. But essentially it outlines the same thing. You can be healthy whether you are a vegan or whether you are a non-vegan. So it's more about the food choices that you make. And obviously we know that cellulose, so vegetable cells, cannot actually be absorbed by the body. So if you do consume vegan foods, likely your body is going to excrete it out more than somebody who is eating meat. So if you are an exerciser, and say you do endurance exercises and you're training 3 hours every day, you will likely need to eat even more food than somebody, who already does consume animal meats or animal products. Or I would also maybe suggest that they supplement with vegan protein. So you will get pea protein, that kind of stuff. The other option I would go with is if people felt like a non-vegan or a non-plant-based diet was not sustainable, there are micro farming. Now, this is such an exciting and
I've seen it.
Yes. So micro farming, because it's super sustainable. And we have, I've got like sachets of cricket powder, cricket snacks, that kind of stuff, because it is like a smidge of the environment that is damaging in how much it creates, like say 27 grams of protein from a cricket as opposed to from a cow. So that's another option to go with. But yes, to answer your question, 100%, you can be healthy on any diet. It just depends on what you choose. But as a vegan or a plant-based dieter, you probably, if you do feel like your body changes and not necessarily in the better ways, and you're feeling a little bit weaker in your training or overall, then maybe look to taking some supplements like vitamins and protein powders if you can.
Okay, great advice. So one last question. You say you prefer your clients to be over 40 just because you feel like more sort of aligned with them. So I'm very lucky to have a mentor who's 80 plus, and yeah, and he comes in and he's had the most amazing life. He was in the army, he's traveled around the world, he's been in every single country, and he comes here. Even during COVID, he'd like literally just come here, and I'd be like, Mike, you can't come here. If I get COVID and kill you, like I'd never forgive myself. And he's just like, no, I'm coming. And he has diabetes, and he's had it for like 25 years. Oh. And like today actually was like, I keep trying to offer him like money, let's go to dinner. He just won't accept anything. And it really, like, it's amazing. And I want to try and like thank him in some way, and he just won't accept anything. So today, actually, weirdly enough, he was sitting here and we were talking, and I was like, Mike, what, I want to try and help you. So like, he was telling me about he's been having problem with diabetes, and recently, because he was getting the energies wrong with that, he started feeling like he might have Alzheimer's, but he's since, because he's getting old, like the doctors, they're just doing loads of tests. Anyway, he's back to normal, completely like there. And I was just wondering, like, do you have any sort of advice from a nutritional point of view, like for someone who maybe has diabetes, and like, obviously he's a lot older, not specifically for him. I'm just also thinking about future listeners and stuff like that. Do you have any sort of nutritional advice for things like that we can pass on, or I can pass on to him? I'm sure he's going to listen to this at one point or another.
I think with something like diabetes, that is outside of my scope of practice. So I don't deal with that side of things. So for me, it's more overall health and athleticism and sports performance. So I would be a little bit worried that I would say the wrong thing. So I think I'm gonna pass on that question.
All right, cool, fine, no worries. All right, great. Well, look, Sherry, I'm so glad that I spoke to you. It's actually like I wasn't expecting it to sort of go that way. That's what's so amazing about this podcast. And I just want to say really thank you for giving us all that insight and wisdom. And I just think that you've given me a lot of clarity about nutrition and how best to, I think the best way to describe nutrition for me is energy, and how to transform that and not worry too much about all these diets and fads and binging. And I just want to, heartfelt thanks for coming on the podcast. And I really, really appreciate it. And I'm sure that this is going to be amazing for some of our listeners. So one final thing that we do is we ask if there is 3 pieces of advice that you would give to, one of your clients or a young person, or like Sherry when she was younger, kind of trying to find her way, any type that you'd like what would be the 3 things that you would impart to to any one of those categories?
The first thing I would say is, and I know this is very common among a lot of people, but I think more among the younger generation, is don't hate on your body. And I cannot say that with any more emphasis on it. Don't hate your body. Your body is doing its absolute best to move you forward, to keep you alive. There might be things about your body that you don't love, but if you can change it, then okay, try to change it. If you can't, then love it and accept it, because there are more important things in life than to focus on the things that you don't love about your body. And I wish that somebody had said that to me when I was younger. I've had like massive thighs as a younger kid, and I'm like, now I feel like my thighs are powerful. I'm like, I want bigger legs so I can squat heavy. There's things like that. The trends in beauty standards, whether for men or women, they change, and it's incredibly unfair, the pressures that they put on young people or people in general. So don't hate on your body. Love your body for what it can do, and just give it love. The other thing I would say is don't restrict food. That's thing, people are like, oh, what's the first advice would you give? Should I give up sugar? And I'm like, absolutely not. Do not restrict anything. Don't give up sugar or dairy because someone else says it's good, unless you've been to the doctors and that is actual medical advice. Don't restrict, because as we said, you give it up for the week, and then the first thing you're going to eat because you miss it so much is, whatever that you've given up. And the other thing is, the last thing, third advice, is to stop labeling food as good and bad, because food isn't evil and food isn't good. Food is factually just energy. Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Sherry. That is absolutely wonderful. Can I ask, can you just tell us where we can find you on Instagram and all of your handles, just for our listeners, because I'm sure there's going to be loads of people that want to sort of find and read your blogs and get to know you a little bit better. Yes, so I am at munchiesandmacros.com. Yep. And I am usually found making very daft reels on IG, and I can be found so it's at Munchies and Macros with an underscore in between the words. Yep. Okay, great. Thank you once again for coming on to the Journey podcast, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I've really enjoyed that talk. Thank you. No worries. My pleasure.